And so welcome to our third session of the big ideas of Jewish prayer. And as mentioned before, my intended purpose for this course is really to both have conversations, but also talk about ideas that can be used during prayer itself to enrich prayer, both as individuals and hopefully also as a community. And I had this earlier this morning. I was thinking about maybe at the end of this course, what we should do is have a minyan. Everybody who's been in this course, have a minyan together, and that would be a nice way to pull everything together. In our last session, we talked about kavanah a lot. Kavanah, it's been on my mind all month. I'm wondering if others have also been thinking about kavanah as we talked about it. And I was thinking about, well, what are the moments where it's easier to express kavanah? So there's one that came back to me a lot. We had Hanukkah, right, for a full 8 days of Hallel. And towards the end, where we say, Hashem Hoshiana, Hashem Hatzlichana, right? God help us, God save us. How do we say it? I'm trying to think how Cantor Figa sings it. It will come back to me. It was on my mind earlier. But I think that when the words are simple and it's easier to bring your kavanah into it. And I found myself when we were in Hallel every day, when we got to that part where you repeat after the lead, the Shaliach Tzibur, Adonai Hoshiana, Adonai Hatzlichana, it's much easier to bring oomph to that, because you can totally immerse yourself into it. And it really is about immersion. Like if you can immerse yourself in that moment of prayer, and we all have different moments that make it easier for us to immerse ourselves, then it just becomes alive and suddenly you're totally in it. And when you're totally in it, that's when suddenly there's really something that's happening. And I was thinking about it also on Friday. We had our musical Shabbat. And I think it was Vladimir who was just at the end just raving about how wonderful it was and how powerful and this and that. And I think part of it is our musical Shabbatot. We really try and create all the circumstances to make it immersive. There's music, the melody is really there. There's 5 people on the bima who are chanting it with you. We're singing nigunim that are easy to sing. So all the circumstances are there to immerse yourself and that feel kavanah. And so the challenge is to find that habit of immersing oneself in the rest of in the other parts, just completely putting oneself fully into the tefillah. So our topic today is finding your own prayer voice. And actually we're going to have two classes which will be a little bit similar. One is finding your own chanting voice, and the other is finding your own prayer voice, what we're doing today. And the two are really linked. I'll be showing a few videos today and more from the chanting class, which will be later in the year. And I think finding your own prayer voice, the way I understand it, is really, our liturgy is so fixed, right? Everything is so fixed. Everything is so set and pre-selected. And it's beautiful, but it's ancient. So how do you find your place, your own voice, when you're using something that's completely fixed, where there's so little room to put of yourself into it, to find your own words? And even I always think about this when it's at the bar bat mitzvah, and we get to the Amidah, and I'm about to tell everybody, a lot of people that are not Jewish, I say, we come to our silent, meditative prayer, and we go from pages so and so to so and so. So it's not like suddenly you have time to just say whatever is in your heart, but you're still following a list set of prayers, right? You're still saying a prayer, and we do part of the Amidah out loud as well, and then you're just going through it. So it's, how do you find your own voice, and how does the Siddur, which are really other people's prayers, right? The Siddur is not prayers that we wrote, but prayers that other people have written. How do those prayers become our prayers? How do they become the same sound as the sound of our own hearts? And it's hard to have kavanah if you're saying somebody else's prayer. It just is, right? You're reading somebody else's words, not your own words. So how do you bring kavanah to that? So that's what we'll be talking about. And because I think once you're able to do, the more one is able to do that, to bring one's own voice into communal prayer, the more the whole thing comes alive for everybody. And so when we talk about chanting voice, how do you find your own chanting voice? Why is it important to have your own chanting voice? Because it's so pre-selected, right? We all say the same words, and we say the same words every day. So in some ways, the voice with which you chant is your place of personal expression. It's how you bring your personal expression, your own kind of soulfulness and your own interpretation into what you're doing. And I think it's one of the things that maybe it's got lost in the way we do services in the liberal movements for the past maybe 150 years, maybe all the way to the beginning of the Reform movement, where it's become much more choreographed. On one hand, it means we're all together and everything has more decorum, but there's also, you don't have that sound of all the voices, which is such a big part of Jewish prayer. You hear many different voices in different places, the sound of all these different people chanting, which I think has a lot of power. And I remember when I was at the conservative yeshiva, we had one teacher who's still there. And when he led services, he encouraged everybody to just bring your own voice, and he was completely tone deaf. So his prayer did not sound beautiful, but what was the sound of his chanting? Well, he grew up with jazz, so he had a jazzy tune. His chanting sounded jazzy, but it sounded really real because he wasn't doing somebody else's. It came from his heart. It was really his own sound of his own jazzy nigun. So it was beautiful, and we all joined in. Jazzy or not, in our own way, and it wasn't the most beautiful tefillah, but it was a powerful tefillah. I think that the sound of our voices creates atmosphere, and the sound of our voices creates a feeling of power, and it's powerful when we sing together. But if we're only singing together, then I think we're losing out in that other way of doing Jewish prayer. And so for me, that way is the most closely associated with the Kotel. When you go to the Western Wall, in the men's section, and I'm not sure about the women's section, but I think as well, but probably in a different way, what you hear is just so many different chanting voices, this way and that way. Everybody's in a different place, right? Some are chanting Tehillim, some are doing a service. Right next to them, somebody else is doing a service, but they're 5 minutes before or 5 minutes later. And you just have the sounds of all these different chanting voices. So this morning, before we get into finding your own prayer voice, I wanted to just bring a little bit of a chanting. And I was going to play a video of chanting at the Kotel. It's at the part of this morning service just before the Shema. I don't think it's the most transcendent davening. It's just a regular davening, but there's a rhythm to the chanting, which is what you hear at the Kotel, which I always find really immersive and meditative and beautiful. So I'm just going to play that very quickly for you. As I get to play, anybody have any thoughts about kavanah left over from last time we got together?
Well, I think last time we had talked about movement. And since then, I've tried to loosen up a little bit and just, feel a little bit freer to sway or move, and it feels a lot better.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Have you found that there's a specific way you move, or?
Probably more side to side than front to back, and
Okay.
but I just
Cool.
move. I know how bad my voice is, so I don't. I watch what I sing because I don't want to overpower people with my my off-key renditions of things. But movement at least gives me the ability to express myself a bit.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Marshall, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yep.
Good, good, good.
Good to see you.
In terms of the tension we spoke about between Keva and Kavanah, there's a story that I would tell the kids, usually at a Kabbalat Sidurim, young kids, about the idea of flying a kite. And I would say that if people know, if you know how good it feels to flying a kite, the only way to get a kite up in the sky is to try it again and again and again. And finally, after several attempts, your kite will fly and soar to the heavens. So it's the same like with prayer, in a sense. You have this keva, you have to keep trying, and then hopefully one day, and for many days to come, just like the kite will soar to the heavens, so will your prayers soar to heaven. And you kind of need both. You need the keva to get to the kavanah.
Beautiful. I always love when you said that. Now, what I would say something similar, Camp Ramah, I would say that prayer is a little bit like snowboarding. For all these kids that's snowboarding, I would say it's because when you snowboard, you fall down a lot at the beginning, but once you learn how to do it, you're just floating around. You're going downhill. Beautiful. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to play this short clip of davening at the Kotel. Let's see.
תדבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאמונתך, לא נבוש ולא ניכנס. תודה שלום, בשם קודשך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך, רחמך וממך תקרבים עלינו, במצב של המלמד, ותשכוננו ממעצמנו, יוליכנו מרחוק ארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, בנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, קרבתנו מלכנו שמך גדול בהבנות לכל החלור על הבית שמך, ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר ואבו ישראל באהבה.
שמע ישראל. שמע ישראל.
אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווה לך על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם שבטך בביתך ובטחך בדרך ובשטחך ובדרך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך הבטחת מעשותיך בשעריך והיה שמוע תשמע.
Okay. You see that you get the movement, definitely a lot of movement, and just the sound of it chanting when they say the Shema. I like it. It's not all together, but it's the Shema here, a Shema there, and I think it's a one way of looking at chanting voice. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that class. But today I want to take us, and actually I have a plan that when I go to Israel tomorrow, and when I finally get out of quarantine, I can go to the Kotel. I'd like to record the sound of the chanting, and I find a place where I can hear a lot of people. I'm going to record it, and then try and use that. And maybe I'll ask if I'm with. There's a woman with me to also record in the women's section if they're willing, so you can get the sound of both of those, to just to hear that. And I think once we hear how many different kinds of prayer voices, it also helps us find one's own prayer voice. But going back to what we're going to talk about today mainly, which is finding the own voice of your own prayer, and finding your own words. So how do our words fit into the keva, fit into the form of the sidur? And one of the reasons I think that it is difficult to find one's own expression to the words and one's own words in general for prayer is those words that Heschel said in that statement that we've read several times. The prayer is really an extension of our relationship with God, with the universe, and we need to have some kind of connection before. And the richer that connection is, the more we have a habit of talking to the divine in general, the more our tefillah is alive, because there's already a flow. And when you get into that moment of prayer, then there's already something there to work with. There's already that relationship. I wanted to take us to first maybe the most important text on prayer in the whole Talmud, which talks about the prayer of Hannah, the story of whom we read on Rosh Hashanah, and talks about what is her prayer is the basis of the Amidah. It's really the basis of all prayer, according to the rabbis. So what did they see in her prayer? And what does it tell us about how we bring our own voice to our prayer? So I'm just going to pull up. So if you already have printed it or brought or the source sheet, we're starting with source number 3, and then we'll go backwards to the first other sources. Okay. Okay. Would someone like to read for us Babylonian Talmud Brachot 31b?
I'll read.
Thank you, Alan.
It's a little blurry.
Is it? I'll try and make it bigger.
Better.
Okay. Go ahead, Alan.
We learned in the Mishnah that prayer should be undertaken in an atmosphere of gravity. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rabbi Elazar said they are derived from the verses describing the prayer of Hannah, mother of Samuel, as the verse states, and she felt bitterness of soul, and she prayed to the Lord, and she wept and wept. And
So
Hannah,
what's the nature of Hannah's prayer? Where is her prayer coming from?
her heart.
From her heart, right? A place of need, really coming from a place of deep need and of deep reaching out. Yeah. Marshall, you're about to say something.
No, I was going to say her heart. Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Alan, continue, please.
And here it goes. And Hannah spoke in her heart. Rabbi Elazar said, in the name of Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra, she spoke concerning her heart. She said before God, sovereign of the universe, among all the things that you have created in a woman, you have not created one without a purpose. Eyes to see, ears to hear, a nose to smell, and breasts to nurse a child. These breasts that you have put on my heart, are they not for nursing? Give me a son so that I may nurse with them.
So what do you think? What do you think of her prayer? It's not a prayer that not a prayer we say as part of our liturgy.
It's very, very, very personal.
Very personal. Yeah. Marshall, were you about to say?
No, I was going to say the same thing. It's her own personal prayer.
Right? Totally her own personal prayer, and very, very relevant. I mean, it's spoken in the language of the tradition, at least the way the rabbis imagine it, right? Sovereign of the universe, but it's a very personal prayer about her need and affecting her. Anybody else?
Well, it seems that, what I was thinking when you were talking about it was that, Eli, the priest Eli, thought that she was drunk because she was moving her mouth, but her lips rather, but sounds weren't coming out. So I think there was an intensity there that that you don't normally have.
Beautiful. Her prayer, the way the rabbis imagine a prayer, is a pretty intense prayer, right? She's saying, you made me this way. Why can't I fulfill the way? It's a very powerful prayer. And the rabbis, there's a whole series of prayers of Hannah, really challenging God, a really powerful passage in the Talmud. At some point we'll learn the whole thing, but it's very powerful and almost borderline heretical what she says and how she pushes God and even threatens God and blackmails God. And it's a very powerful prayer. But here, there really is a prayer from which we learn the basis of rabbinic prayer. So go ahead, Alan, please continue reading.
Okay. Rav Hamnuna said, how many significant halachot can be derived from these verses of the prayer of Hannah? As it says, and Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved and her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought her to be drunk. The Gemara elaborates from that which is stated here, and Hannah spoke in her heart, the halacha that one who prays must focus his heart on his prayer is derived.
Right, beautiful. The same thing that we all came to. Her prayer is from the heart, and this is where we came from seeing her prayer, and that's what the Gemara derives. When you pray, it should be from the heart. Go ahead.
And from that which is stated here, only her lips moved. The halacha that one who prays must enunciate the words with his lips, not only contemplate them in his heart, is derived. From that which is written here, and her voice could not be heard, the halacha that one is forbidden to raise his voice in his Amida prayer, as it must be recited silently. From the continuation of the verse here, so Eli thought her to be drunk. Can you raise the halacha that a drunk person is forbidden to pray? That is why he rebuked her.
Thank you. We have here the particulars of Jewish prayer, and that something that must be really unique to us of the Amidah, of saying a prayer so you can see the lips move, but not hearing any voice, not hearing much more than just a faint sound. What do you think of that? That part of.
I think it plays out in that when, like, in fact, in the video that you showed, the Shaliach Sibor, the man who was leading the davening, was pretty much, well, he was davening out loud, including when they got to the Shema and V'ahavta, which is, usually said a little silently. But I've been in minyanim where people will say the Shema, audibly, that you will hear that. So it's interesting from the piece about the halacha that comes from from Chana, that the davening is pretty much out loud using your lips, but the Amidah is silent, and that's how it plays out very often, I find.
Yeah, it is, and you see that if we continue the video to the Amidah, you see when he's saying Amidah, his lips are moving, but you can't hear what he's saying. Right? And it creates a very particular feeling. You're not quite meditating. The Amidah is not supposed to be total silence, though the Baal Shem Tov says that when you pray, if you get to a moment where you're totally taken up in your prayer, you're soaring like the kite, then you can stop moving your lips. But the moving of your lips also creates a meditative feeling, and it's also, again, bringing expression, finding your voice within all of it. And so. Also, the thought of her not being drunk, that play, there's a whole series of halachot of, how you should be when you pray. And it doesn't quite apply to Purim, I guess. So I wanted to, now we're going to go to our first source, because really, if we see what the rabbis imagine prayer, where does prayer come from? It comes from the very personal prayer of Chana, right? But the prayers in the Siddur are not that personal, because how can it be that personal? Because they have to apply it to everybody. But the question is how to bring that personal aspect, our own voice, into the tefillah, so that we really feel our whole heart is in it and our whole soul is into it. Because they don't say Chana's prayer is the basis for those moments where you're not in the keva, when you're by yourself. They say her prayer is the basis of the Am itself, of prayer itself. So to some degree, that personal prayer, however conscious or unconscious, has to be woven into the regular prayer that we're doing. And it's an interesting kind of coming together. Somehow, while you're saying the words of Siddur, you have to also bring your own soul and bring what Chana is bringing. So in the, go ahead, somebody was about to say something. Go ahead. Okay. In the Hasidic tradition, so Rabbi Nachman, right? In general, the Hasidim revive prayer and really bring a whole new level of kavanah to prayer. But Rabbi Nachman recognizes, he was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he recognizes how difficult it is to have your own prayer voice within the regular tefillah, and that there's a need for something else as well. You can't just have the regular keva tefillah, and that's everything you've got. There needs to be something else which really makes your soul a little bit more on fire, so that when you come to the tefillah, you've already got something going, some share. So he came up with this concept called hitbodedut. And hitbodedut, I don't know how many of you have seen Shtisel on Netflix. So there's a scene in Shtisel where Shtisel goes out, he's with a few friends into the forest, and it sounds like they're screaming in the forest, or they're singing in the forest. So they're doing hitbodedut, right? If you go into some forest around Jerusalem, you find people talking to God. Sometimes they're screaming, sometimes they're talking. But it's just, I knew somebody who would do this every day. Hitbodedut is a practice of spending time every day where you're just talking to God with zero keva, just pouring your heart out, bearing your heart out. It's a really beautiful practice that I've known that people who did this, who spend half an hour every day. You sit on your chair and just start to talk to God, and just talk and see what happens, and see what people see what you feel and how it develops over days and months. So this is where Rabbi Nachman initially talked about this. Would somebody like to read this? Set aside time each day. Suzanne, do you mind reading this part? You're on mute.
Sorry. Set aside time each day to meditate in a room or in the fields. While there, speak out whatever is in your heart with words of grace and supplication. These words should be in the language you normally speak, so that you will be able to express yourself as clearly as possible. When you entreat God in the language you are used to, the words are closer to your heart and will therefore flow more easily.
Okay. Thank you. So let's go a little bit more into depth. And here is just from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and those who follow Rabbi Nachman are called the Breslover Hasidim. So there's a whole website, breslov.org. And they take it to the utmost. They really take this idea of hitbodedut, but I think it's a really powerful idea. And I think, if one can find a few minutes every day, just 2 minutes to just have a little bit of hitbodedut, you don't have to start with half an hour, but just a few minutes of hitbodedut every day when you're in a room, or even better outside, and just talking to the universe, even if whatever your conception of God is, talking to the universe, talking to your deepest self, talking to God, and just create that connection that really, I think, brings personal expression, and creates that habit of bringing one's own words into. I think so many of us, we talked about this before, when we're in times of trouble, we have no trouble finding the words from our heart to suddenly cry out and say, we need some help. But the rest of the time, we don't really find those words. But here is a whole practice. So let's go ahead. Suzanne, if you mind, please read on.
Rabbi Avraham Hazan used to say, hitbodedut, which is consistent every day, is thousands upon thousands of times greater than hitbodedut that is interrupted. Rabbi Nachman taught that it's best to find a location which is conducive to meditation and which will allow you to concentrate on your words undisturbed. A private room is good, a park better, out in the fields or forest still better. In short, the quieter and more secluded the place is, the more ideal it is for hitbodedut. Rabbi Nachman teaches it is good to begin your hitbodedut by saying, today I am starting to attach myself to you. Start anew every day. If yesterday was good, I hope that today will even be better. If yesterday wasn't the way it should have been, well, today is a new beginning and it will be good. Hitbodedut encompasses the entire spectrum of life, from the simple daily affairs of man to the lofty spiritual heights to which we aspire. Rabbi Nachman said to, do you want me to go on? Or?
Sure, yeah, those 2 lines.
Okay. Rabbi Nachman said to Reb Nosson, a person should practice hitbodedut in a simple, straightforward manner, as if you were conversing with a close friend.
Thank you. Beautiful. What do you think? What does everybody think about this? Any thoughts, comments? So one of the things that Rabbi Nachman is known for is his positivity, right? He says it's a mitzvah to be happy always. So I love how he says you should begin your hitbodedut by just saying, today I'm starting to attach myself to you. If yesterday was good, I hope that today will be even better. If yesterday wasn't the way it should have been, well, today is a new beginning and it will be good. You know, what a nice way to start the conversation with positivity, and to make sure that our conversation and our flow is also leading us to a good place. Anybody have any other thoughts about this? I would encourage everybody. Go ahead. Suzanne, go ahead.
I think it really correlates to the first prayer you say in the morning is Moda'ani or Mode'ani for a man. It's like, thank you. You know, it's the whole, I think it's pretty much the whole orientation of gratitude that you begin your day with.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's so interesting, you know, our tefillah, I talk about this all the time, but Jewish prayer really started, right? The Siddur, as I always say, used to be this thick, but over the years it became thicker and thicker and thicker as we added more and more prayers. And sometimes it's hard to keep hold of just the one emotion, gratitude. You know, you say Mode'ani lefanecha, and you know, if you could spend 5 minutes on only that, or 5 minutes on the Birchot HaShachar, really thinking about each one, it's really alive. But our prayer is really long, so you have to go through a lot of things. So it's hard to really stay focused on one emotion, one prayer, and let it come alive for us and find personal expression within our own hearts and minds, and kind of contemplate it and meditate. And it's so easy for it just to become words that we're saying, and to not bring that deeper level of kavanah. So when I was at Camp Ramah teaching kids about prayer, you know, Ramah is the perfect place to do hitbodedut, and we would go out and we would try it, and they would be very reticent at first, but then they'd get into it. It was fun to watch them. You know, I think there's something very powerful about doing this alongside the keva, alongside the prayers. And again, I would encourage everyone, try it. You know, don't do it. You don't have to do half an hour if you don't want it, but just try 2-3 minutes as a practice, not just this practice of talking first 3 minutes, and if it works for you, try 5 and then do a little bit more. Just trying to block out that time where we're just talking and begin with those words. Today, I'm starting to attach myself to you. And again, I think that like any practice, as I was said at the beginning, the consistency, and if you do it just doing it for a week and see how that shifts everything. And if you go to Minyan in the morning, see if that shifts the Minyan somehow for you. If you do it before Minyan, you just try and have those 3-4 minutes where you're talking, kind of having that internal conversation, and see if that gets the rest of the prayer, and potentiates that. So let's move forward, what I wanted to bring is, okay, so we say, okay, shtisel, right? It's the Hasidim to do this, but we're not Hasidim. You know, how are we going to find the space to do hitbodedut or to talk? But I think that this idea of finding your own prayer voice and interpreting prayers, finding that space to really express what's inside your heart, and talking about it in a way that's both using the words of the tradition, but also really personal, like Chana. I think really Chana's prayer is such a beautiful prayer because it's completely personal, but it also has a feeling of the tradition to it. I did a whole series earlier in the year about the new Israeli music, right? The new music coming out of Israel over the last maybe 2 decades, where previous, previous secular rockers and people who were not religious in the slightest became, Bali Tshuva, became returned to faith, and suddenly started to sing rock songs and other kinds of music forms, but really bearing their hearts. And I've heard some people talk about it as like a new Jewish liturgy, because they're using new music to express the prayer in their hearts, and they're coming up with new ways of understanding the prayer. And truly, this is what Jewish prayer originally was. So in our Amidah, right, at the end of every prayer, there's a Chatima, right? For example, the first one is Baruch Atah, and then Magen Avraham, and we've added Ufoked Sarah, right? That's the end of the first blessing. Now, originally, every blessing in the Amidah, and for the rest of our tefillah, the Chatima, that last part was set, but the prayer leader would improvise the other parts. The prayer leader would bring, it was like jazz, or like spoken word poetry, would improvise the words before. So if you knew the first prayer was about the shield of Abraham, then they would make up a beautiful prayer before that, and that's what would come out. And it was a very personal prayer, obviously, because it was being made up in the moment and it was coming from the heart. And what happened, and this is how prayer became more and more concrete, after a while, when there were people heard some famous prayer leaders make up these prayers that they thought were beautiful, where their words became part of the Siddur. Then other people's words became more and more. So it became longer and longer. And initially, when you just had one part that was fixed, which was the end, the Chatima, and all the rest was not fixed, it became more and more of our prayer became fixed until right now it's been 2,000 years that we've been praying in a similar way, and it's so very fixed. So in some ways, what I'm doing is trying to take us back to the beginning of that period where there was more creativity and more soulfulness, and it was about bringing your own heart, your own words. And not all of us are as skilled as some of these prayer leaders were, but we can, if it's personal, and I think that's all that matters. And I think some of this new Israeli liturgy is coming from the heart. It's people expressing traditional thoughts, but from their own way, as a secular rocker trying to become more and more religious. Or there was the whole Banai family, or some of the most popular musicians doing this in Israel, and talking about the struggles of everyday people, but weaving it into the traditional tropes of Jewish prayer and making it come from the heart. So Shuli Rand, he's the actor who plays an Ushpizin, and that character is in some ways very much himself, but he was someone who grew up secular, as far as I know, or at least was very secular for long periods of his life, and then suddenly became religious. He then became religious, he became Haredi, became ultra-Orthodox, and he started to write songs that were not about what rock songs typically are, but about issues of faith. And in some ways, this is his first song from part of his first album that really did this in a very moving way. And it started this whole phenomenon of Israeli music having spiritual and religious undertones. Because before it was the music of the kibbutz, right? It was the music, it wasn't as deeply religious or spiritual. And so Shuli Rand started it with this, this song is called Ayeka, right? This is what God says to Adam and Eve after they've eaten of the fruit. He says, Ayeka, where are you? And it's God's way of saying, well, where are you, Adam and Eve? What's happened to you? So here's Shuli Rand who's saying Ayeka back to God, where are you? So I wanted to first play it. And I'm playing a version that is not just by Shuli Rand, but by another, probably the biggest new Israeli religious singer at the moment, whose name is Yishai Ribo, a French Jew originally from Marseille who moved to Israel. So there's not much visual. You can see there's a picture, but you can hear them, and they're at a concert, and Shuli Rand he joins him afterwards. He's the older gentleman. So I'm going to play Ayeka. So maybe what I'll do actually is I will keep the words up and just play the song in the back. I'll play the song in the background. I think that will work better. Okay, let's do that. That's an ad. Another ad. Here we go. Can everybody hear? לפעמים אני
That's surely around. Going to just stop it. Just going to quickly share the screen so you could see the picture. Beautiful, isn't it? So here's a picture of both of them, Isha Ribo and Shuli Rand. So let's just quickly read the words of that. Beautiful words, at least I think so. So let me read for us.
O God Almighty, openly speaking, sometimes I have no desire to be in your world. Where can I hide from thee? What will I claim? How will I justify myself? What shall I say? Merciless and gracious, all bare before thee, is a Jew hanging by a hair-thin thread, fighting the sadness, the despair that gnaws like a worm. The happiness had fled from me, and so did my sanity. Voices from the past whisper me to stop, but I keep on rowing in the dark, asking and wishing, where art thou? The same old fool keeps sending darts my way. That same old fool keeps sending darts my way. I go and fail. He just grows stronger. Sacred soul, don't you cry, broken winged, for you'll testify how much I've yearned. When secrets from the past ordered me to stop, but I keep on rowing in the dark, asking and wishing, where art thou? At the end of the day, I will be expelled onto the sand. The merciful land shall collect me to it, and then I'll shout and justify myself and tell how in this darkness I would row, asking and wishing and yearning, where art thou?
Thank you. So very similar to Hannah's prayer in some kind of way, right? It's the same prayer, where art thou? Could easily have been part of the words of Hannah's prayer, and the prayer about searching for God and asking God to help. And so what I'd like to do for this last 10 minutes is invite everyone. We're going to look at the first prayer of the Amidah. I'm going to invite everyone
to spend 5 minutes and see if they could just see if of writing your version of the first prayer of the Amidah. And my thought would be to then once we've written our version, can share it then, or you don't have to try once praying it alongside or even instead of the prayer when you get to shul. Your own version, what would your own version, your own voice of the first prayer of the Amidah sound like? So you can do it on paper or do it on the computer. And I think doing that is really claiming, making the tefillah our own. So I'm going to pull up now, a lot of screen sharing this time. Okay. This is the first page, the famous page 36b of our Siddur. So praise are you, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, great, mighty, awesome, exalted God who bestows loving kindness. Creator of all, you remember the pious deeds of our ancestors and will send a Redeemer to their children's children because of your loving nature. You are the sovereign who helps and guards, saves, and shields. Praise are you, shield of Abraham and guardian of Sarah. It's like everyone to maybe try that. Try seeing if, try rewriting it or thinking where you would add or what ideas, where you would bring thoughts to, what parts of this you would add words or change words. Is the theme about protection, right? Shield of Abraham, a guardian of Sarah sounds like protection. It's about maybe connecting to the patriarchs and matriarchs and to their stories, connecting to where they come from, or connecting to all the soul of Israel, or maybe it's connecting to certain aspects of who they are, or maybe it's something completely different. Maybe it makes us think of someone we knew called Sarah or Abraham in our lives. So I invite everyone to maybe to go ahead, try and write that. We'll spend 5 minutes. Just try and write your own version of it. let's do one more minute and then reconvene. Okay, so let's come back. Anybody willing to share either what it was like to write it or some of what they wrote or thought about?
Oh, I'll give it a try.
Okay, thank you.
Just the beginning. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, God of my ancestors, God of Beverly and Jerry, God of Riva and Chaim, God of Mayasa and Misha. Great, mighty, exalt God, who bestowed loving kindness on them and on us. That's as far as I got.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I had very much the same thoughts.
Talked about your personal ancestors.
I did the same idea of, you know, my parents and grandparents, and
Mhm.
somehow that makes it a lot more personal.
Wonderful. Anybody else? So what?
That was my thinking. I mean, that's what I wrote. Very much the same thing.
Okay. So when I did this, I said, praise you, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors. And in my mind, I thought, whose footsteps we still walk in. I added that because even though it's there, but somehow I wanted that to be explicit. And in my mind, I said, God of Abraham, and in my mind added, who argued with God at Sodom, and Isaac, who was loyal to his faith, and Jacob, who, you know, I kind of, because I think that's, for me, the subcurrent of all of it, but it's not explicit. So that part became explicit as I was saying that. Jacob, who wrestled with the angel, Sarah, who had divine sight. Eventually got to Leah, who was unloved, but mothered the tribes, and great, mighty, awesome, exalted God, who bestows loving kindness, even though we don't always feel that loving kindness. Creator of all, you remember the pious deeds of our ancestors, and though we're a little bit less pious, please remember us too. And brings a redeemer. May we all have awaken a redeeming quality within myself. So I think for me that was the direction that I was trying to do it a little bit like in the mode of Shuli Ran or Chana, of taking the words that are here and making it a personal plea as well, in a certain kind of way, of putting in my words of my spiritual emotion into it. And it might look different every day, I guess, but there might be 2 or 3 that I use on different days if I were to do it. I mean, I think it really would be interesting to try and bring this prayer. I'll try and bring my one. I'll bring my one to shul or to minyan, and I'll try doing it before I do the other one, and see how it feels different than just saying these words. Anybody willing to try that as well? Wonderful. Great. Well, I really thanks everybody for joining. I really think that this is a big part of always making our tefillah feel more real and alive to us, and it's bringing our own heart, our own thoughts, trying to make our prayer like Chana's, whatever's going within our heart or our mind, and could be different every day, but trying to bring that into the words. Not always replace the words, but bring it into the words and see where the words fit it, making it a conversation with the Siddur, as well. And obviously you can't do that with every single prayer, or your prayer will last 3 hours instead of half an hour. But little parts here and there. And also, so if you're willing to do it, I would set the homework for next month to try a few minutes of Hitbodedut a few times, or every day if you can, and trying to bring this own sense of your own prayer into the tefillah as well.